So let's talk about weight shift. Let's explain weight shift in the golf swing because it is so important to your golf. If you can get this right, it really can unlock some better golf, some more distance, some more consistency, but it's incredibly hard to see. We often can't see it, you know, with the naked eye or through the camera. That's why we have so much technology nowadays which enables us to measure it. Now, we've got things like terms like weight, we've got terms like pressure. I've got in my coaching studio a body track which measures pressure, it throws up some numbers. But really the goal today is to keep it super simple, you know, just to give you some ideas that you can take straight to the range without thinking about numbers and pressures and weights. And we're going to look at it with iron first, and then we're going to show you how it differs with the driver, and it does differ with the driver. So we're really going to be looking at sort of four really key elements of this. Where is the weight it's set up? What does it do in the backswing? What does it do in the downswing? And where is it at impact? So 6 iron in hand. And whilst this is a 6 iron, this first section of the video is really applying to all of the golf clubs where the ball is on the ground. That's most of them. Might be a 3-wood you'd hit off a tee, but all of the clubs where you'd hit the ball from the ground, even though I've got this slightly teed up. So I'm going to take my address. And what I'd love you to do first of all is once you've got your feet in position, just stand up nice and straight and try and find that 50-50 position. So you might have to sort of rock back and forward to find that. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see so many good players making these little movements with their feet to try and find that nice balanced position. Once you're in that position, I'd love you to start by using your knees and your hips to put a little bit more pressure through that lead side. The key message here is it wasn't done with my head. I didn't tip my head forward, which also puts more weight there. I did it through my midsection. Now, I don't really want you to think of a number. I just want you to feel like you move that until you just start to sense a little bit more of your weight is through that lead side. That's how I'd like you to start and set up with all of the clubs where the ball is on the ground. Simply the reason for that is we need to land the club target side of the ball. So if we need that to happen, it would make sense that we start a little bit there. As soon as we start with the weight here, it makes that incredibly difficult. We have to make lots of compensations within the swing. So our job number one is nail the setup a little bit more on your lead side. What's it do in the backswing? Well, I'm sure many of you will be aware that we want the weight to move into that trail leg. That's great. However, that and that would be very different. Both of those swings had the weight moving into that trail leg, but as you can see there, they looked incredibly different. So how should it happen? Well, this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult to actually do because we want to keep the head about centered. We don't really want too much movement in that head, yet we want the pressure or the weight to go into that trail leg, and we want it to be mostly there by the time your lead arm gets around about level with the ground. Now we should, when the lead arm is level with the ground, have around about 90 degrees of shoulder turn, give or take. So this is the little drill I want you to go through to try and feel this. You're going to take a golf club and pop it on your shoulders. And very simply, from that starting position where you've got a little bit more left, you're going to rotate until you feel as if the club or the grip, depending on which end is out here, gets roughly above the golf ball. And you can see that there. That's going to mean that I've got around about 80 degrees of shoulder rotation. And as you do that, very simply, I want you to lift this lead foot. Now, hopefully you can see as I'm doing that the head is staying pretty centered. I don't mind if there's a little bit of movement, but what it's really training me to do is move my weight into that trail leg at the right point of the golf swing, which is incredibly important, whilst maintaining a pretty steady head. Once you've done that, bring the golf club in and do the same thing. So I'm loading into this leg, but I'm keeping my head centered and I'm doing it at the right time. Now, for many of you who struggle with the weight shift, this will be earlier than what you're used to. So often we'll see the golf club moved away too much with the hands and the arms. Then the golfers read or heard that the weight should shift and they get to around about here and they start to move over this way and they'll feel the weight over here, and so then in their mind they'll give themselves a bit of a tick and say, that's perfect, I'll move my weight into my trail side. But as you can see, that was timing wasn't very good, the head swayed a lot, really difficult to get back from there. So we need to make sure that we're going early and the head is staying centered. Now we think about the downswing. Now the key point here is I'm not going to actually tell you where the weight should be at the top of your golf swing, because what is the top? Is the top when the club stops, or is the top when the body stops? It's a little bit of a grey area, there's a transition there. If we can start to think about where the weight is halfway into the backswing and where the weight is halfway into the downswing, we're going to nail that transition anyway. So our same reference point is going to get used. On the downswing, when your lead arm is level with the ground, you want to feel most of your weight or your pressure is through that lead leg. Now, all the information in this video is going to help you, but if you had to pull out one bit, this would be that golden piece of information which is going to help you hit those clubs better. Not enough golfers do this well enough. Not enough golfers get the weight to the lead side enough or early enough in that downswing. Most of the great players that you see are going to have pressure and weight under the left leg, and most of it very, very early in the downswing. So how do we do that? Well, very simply, you think about pushing into that ground. Think about if I was stood on 2 bathroom scales. And I just use easy numbers. Let's say, these are nowhere near numbers. Let's say that was 50 kilograms, that was 50 kilograms. Okay, if I move my weight over here, that would now show 100 kilograms. That's weight shift. What I really want you to try and do is make a movement where you feel like you would get this scale to read higher than 100. That's a big difference. It's not just simply a case of moving your weight or your mass over there. You're actually trying to push down, really starting to push down. I'm trying to get that scale to read 110, 120 kilograms because the force that I'm applying through that lead side. That's a great concept, it's a great idea for you to really get that downswing initiated correctly. If you do that, you're really going to start to feel that you have the pressure there, and then from there we can just rotate through and we're going to finish with 100% of a weight on our left side. Now I appreciate there's a lot of talking there, a lot of information, but hopefully you can sort of condense those ideas into some feelings that you can use next time you play. So let's go ahead and hit this one, and then we're going to talk about how the driver might be just a little bit different. Right, the big stick, the driver. It is different, it should be different, it'll feel different, you're going to have some different ideas and some different concepts with the golf swing. If your weight shift is the same with the driver as it is with the irons, you're not getting the most out of this. So what is different? Well, we're really going to focus on 2 areas because there are some things which are quite similar. The first thing would be the setup. So this time, once I get my feet in position and I stand up and I find that 50-50 position, that's how I want to set up. So I'm just going to tip over from there. So when I address the golf ball with the driver, I'm just feeling very, very balanced. And that's going to be the best way to start that golf swing. Remember, we said the ball was on the ground with the other clubs. This time it's on the tee, so we are looking and we're after for a different delivery. We want this more sweeping upward hit. We can encourage that to happen by just making sure that our weight distribution is correct at the setup. Now, backswing. Good news, it's the same. We want most of our weight to be into our trail side, and we want that to happen early, by the time the lead arm is around horizontal with the ground, and we don't want the head to move too much. Very similar to the iron, we don't have to change anything there. As we go into transition and the downswing, good news again, it's the same as the iron. We're trying to put more force, more pressure under that lead side, and most of it by the time the arm's at level with the ground. It's the same. After that, it's when it starts to get a little bit different. And I have to say before I go into this isn't something you intentionally do, it's just the nature of how we swing. Let me go through why this is different. I'm going to make this a little exaggerated to demonstrate this, but let's say I took this huge wide stance. Now this is obviously too wide, but with a driver we do have a wider stance. The middle of me is much more behind my lead foot versus if I had a much narrower stance. So with the driver, when we have this wider stance, we go into this trail leg, we transition and we move into, we put the pressure into this lead side. But just notice how the middle of me is still way behind that foot. So once the pressure is into that lead side and I start to push away from the ground, it's naturally going to be pushing me up, but also backwards a little bit. When I have this super narrow stance and I put the weight there, when I push, it just kind of pushes me up. Whereas the driver, we often see through the golf ball, this push up and back, and we often feel and sense that there's then more weight on this back foot. It's absolutely fine. There's countless examples of golfers who are incredibly talented, great drivers of the golf ball, who will almost finish with a little bit of weight on the back foot. Like I said, it's not trying to do that, it's just the nature of this wide stance, the middle of you is much more behind your foot, and as you start to push, it pushes you back. And you can just do that little demonstration there. You can put your feet very close and start to push from that left side, and you'll feel like it pushes you up. Big wide stance, push from the left side, and notice how it's pushing me more back. So we don't really have to think about that, but it's just understanding that you might have some different feels through impact with the driver versus your iron. So let's go ahead and hit this one. I'm going to take a slightly wider stance than I normally would, because it might help us demonstrate this a little bit better. But there's my 50-50 super wide stance. And that is a perfect drive. But look at my finish position from that face on camera. I feel like I'm leaning back almost, well, probably 60, 70, 80% of my weight's on my back leg, but it wasn't because I fell back. I actually got into that lead side correctly, but then the way I went through impact caused that to happen. And I don't know if you saw the ball flight there, but I'd be very, very happy with that drive. So, weight shift explained. Hopefully we know tech, hopefully we know strange words, simple advice that you can take to the practice area and understand the difference between iron and driver next time you play.